Apparently there was a little island in the river near Memphis. And the water subsided and the island got bigger and bigger and bigger. The University of Tennessee, which got the big old glass pyramid down there. You've been down there and saw this thing?
I've seen it.
And the statue of Ramesses that the president of Hemmitt gave them, a replica of Ramesses. They went and excavated the land, and they dug up a lot of ancient black bodies. In that land, on that island in the river in Memphis, Tennessee. The lady went on to say that based on legend has it, that when the Europeans got to Memphis, Tennessee, they didn't name Memphis, Tennessee based on their knowledge of Memphis, Egypt, or Memphis, Kemet, based on them being Masons or whatever. In this particular case, what happened is, the legend has it, is when they first settled the land, the Native Americans, or the Native Indigenous people that we call Indians, or the Native Americans, said that this particular place is called Memphis. And they insisted upon it that this place was to remain Memphis. And it was the Native Americans that taught the European settlers about Memphis. And they went into the story. This is some remarkable stuff. It went into the story that at their first beginning of whenever they migrated in, there were these Egyptians living on the land in Memphis. That was a subsidiary of original Memphis, Egypt.
What period are we talking?
It's hard to say because we have to find out the period of when these particular Native Americans got there. So it had to be a very early period, probably a couple of hundred years before the European settlers got there. So it's not going to be that hard to do the work on when the Europeans settled Memphis. And they said, the story goes that this is Memphis, named after groups of Egyptians or black people that was here when we migrated into the land, the Native Americans. And the story goes that, as you know, in Africa and in Egypt, they didn't have a real jail system because certain things were taboo. So somebody says it's kind of hard to believe that death is taboo because we have so much people being murdered around us till it's a way of life, until it's kind of hard to perceive that death can be taboo. But if you just notice black people right in the 20th century, before the 1980s, we had several things in our community we just didn't do. You know, there's several things that was taboo, and we could go on and on list of things we just didn't do. For an example, let's even talk about killing. Now, John Henry Clark said that he believed that Malcolm X was murdered by a higher power as far as the United States government, because you have to study black people's killing style. He said a black person will never go stand over somebody and empty the gun in them, not unless they was ordered specifically to do that. We usually just kill because we get probably mad and out of our mind. But after we shoot the person, we come to our senses. and probably recognize what we did. But we wouldn't violently stand over a person with the purpose of emptying the guns in the chest. That's just not our killing style. And we talk about if we got killing patterns, we could take the killing patterns from just the 20th century when we fell into this foolishness of murder. We just didn't do certain things. You see what I'm saying? This might be a little raunchy for some people, but I remember as late as the 1980s and as late as the early 80s and the mid 70s, where it was taboo for a black man to even admit that he had oral sex. You just didn't do it. You see, even Richard Pryor commented on it on one of his tapes. You know, black man don't never admit he ate something. You see what I'm saying? So we know that there's several taboos that we just didn't do. You see what I'm saying? There's several things that we see white children would do that we wouldn't dare do in front of our parents. You see what I'm saying? In front of our parents. Now, going back to this, because we didn't have a jail system, some of the penalties were, because it wasn't probably some real vicious things, but if you did some stuff that was just taboo or unforgivable at that particular point, you just were allowed to leave the community. And that was enough punishment to be uprooted from your original dwelling place or habitat, which, because culture was everything, but outside of culture, you were nothing. So it would be taboo, or it would be just as much psychological punishment to be banished from a society. Well, the legend has it is that there was a new state set up in the Americas for people who, number one, were banished from the societies, and they would settle in remote places. Well, the legend has it that one of the places was Memphis, Egypt. First, it was a settlement for people who were banished from the societies, and later on, based on visitation and trade with these particular people, it later on became a province of ancient Kemet, and was named Memphis. This is the information that the sister gave based on the legends of the Native Americans. You see what I'm saying? Now, there's all kind of Masonic history the European is hiding. In Richard Noon's book, Ice the Ultimate Disaster, 5/5/2000, Ice the Ultimate Disaster, he quotes several Masonic organizations that had held on certain information that is also quoting the early white settlers, here again, in America, when he said that when the white settlers settled Maine, the state of Maine, they found Egyptians or Canaanites reading, writing, and speaking hieroglyphics in that area. As well as to go on to say that in the early 1800s in Oklahoma, they found a stela or a stone tablet, a writer of Akhenaten. Long before Akhenaten's hymns, long before they even knew who Akhenaten was, long before they even excavated Tel al-Amarna. Because, you know, he was the heretic king stricken from the monuments. But they found stelas or these stone plates in Oklahoma long before they even knew who Akhenaten was. There's reports of whole temples, the temple of Isis, the temple of Osiris, in the Grand Canyon. Now all of a sudden, mysteriously, you can't go to certain parts. This is that book, what's called God Rules the Negro. Why, if it's false, why would the government bother to come in and confiscate almost 95% of all the books that they could find, or 98% of all those books, if it didn't have some truth? You see what I'm saying? If it didn't have some truth. So you hear these Moorish organizations saying that there was Egyptians and ancient people over here long before the slaves got here. And this is probably some of the greatest mysteries on the earth. You see what I'm saying? But we cannot do like a European and set certain standards that later on will hinder us from looking into greater insights, even into history, by saying, no, this is the way it is. You know what I'm saying? This is the way it is. We can't do that. So there's just as much a Camite history of America that's connected with us as it is West Africa. Now let me give you some metaphysical aspects of why this is to be. Because we can always rely on the text. Now the text say, no, keep going. Okay. The text say that a great text that says, and this is the Hebrew one, and the Egyptian ones, out of Egypt I will call my son.
Yeah. All black people know that text.
That text. Out of Egypt I will call my son.
Yeah.
Now to break this down.
Ethiopia stretched forth her hand to God.
Yeah, Ethiopia will stretch forth her hand to God. Okay. Or you also hear of the Son of Man being in the West. That's also in the Bible, you know. Well, let me give you some deeper insights into this.
Okay.
The esoteric tradition, which is your metaphysical tradition of the Old Testament, would be your Kabbalah.
All right.
Now, the Kabbalah states that there will be what is called a great mixing bowl in the West. The great mixture of souls in the West. And what it means is this, also to give you another one. The Hermetic text that I often quote from say that there will be a land that will be in the West or at the ends of the earth that all types of race would come to and dwell in that land. But there will be an extremity or a appendage or a extract of ancient Kemet that will be in that land also. There will be some Egyptians that will be in that land also. And those Egyptians will establish Mayat.
Okay, all right.
So we have text. See, if we're talking about several ways we want to look at, what we call truth or proof. Well, we just go and see what the records with the Egyptians say. There's even been translations of the word Osiris or Osar that meant the West. It means the West.
I'm not familiar with that, Byron.
Yes. It meant the West. It might be, if I'm not mistaken, in this book, Egyptian Book of the Dead, or going forth, the book of Going Forth by Day, translated by Raymond Faulkner. This particular book, that, if I'm not mistaken, I've even found references to it in this particular book. about the West being named after Osiris. So it's talking about a Western body of Egyptians that is extracted from the mainland, torn apart, and scattered throughout the land, and then put back together in the West by our set, Isis. But there's a form of Isis called the winged Isis, which is Mayat. You see? Which is Mayat. Now let me give you a greater scientific terminology of what the great mixing bowl in the West is. The people in Africa are so old until there is no birth records.
What do you mean? No birth records.
Well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, as a symbolic number, we're 66 trillion years old. It's a symbolic number to represent there is no beginning. As long as you want a doggone record history, we were there. Now, they got some translations of some Arabic texts in Europe. They got there by the way of the Moors. But the texts are so old until the original or the irregular Arabs, or what you call your regular Arabic or modern day Arabic, is different from it. It means that this came from an older people and an older dialect and older linguistics of this Arabic. In order for them to translate it, they had to go and search the land in remote parts of Arabia to find people of the Cushite Arab, which was the original people who settled that land before the Indo-European came in and mixed with all different types of race. They had Cushite Arabs, which were Ethiopians.
Yeah, but isn't Arab a recent?
Well, I'm not talking about the recent thing that we call Arab. I'm just talking about Arabians.
Okay.
See, there's Arabia land existed before the modern day person we call them Arab.
All right.
So
But
Cushite-
they were called Arabs.
No, they would call Arabs, but we just talk about Cushite Arabia.
Okay, right. So we leave the word Arab off.
Leave the word Arab out, and we only using the word Arabia as a geographical location.
Okay. All right. We got it.
So we're just talking about northeast Kush.
Yeah.
You see?
Right.
And for the lack of a better word, Kushite Arabians.
Okay.
Which in some historical aspects, including Sheikh Anta Diop, had even recognized Muhammad's, if there was a person, father, as being one of these Kushite Arabians, or these people of Kush. Drusilla Dundee Houston's book, The Wonderful Ethiopians in the Kushite Empire, talks about that settlement of Arabia with Kushite or Ethiopians on up into Indus Kush, which is your Indus Valley, which is India. So wherever this writing was, they had to go find a family old enough to translate this. When they translated it, it had a timeline on it of 2 billion years.
2 billion years.
2 billion years are not no 8 man, but advanced beings
talking about there have been many, many, many
Yes,
civilizations.
yes, because see, we have to do this if we're going to say we're superior, if we're going to have to believe in not what modern scholarship says the way you're going to look at things, we got to believe in what the Egyptians say. The Egyptians, to this day, I'm ready to debate anybody where they can show me that the ancient Egyptians say that we came from apes. Or to say we came from these different hominid stages that they are claiming. So we got two kind of history. We're not necessarily saying that they didn't find bones of these older people, these older hominid type of animal people or whatever, but it could very well be bones of a series of apes and not necessarily the original man. You see, we still get this foolishness from Charles Darwin. And as far as the European is concerned, if you're going to be in his university, you got to make a choice. You either got to believe in the theory of evolution of this ape thing and natural selection, or you got to believe in theology.